Hi, Lee Phillips here. I want to talk about a topic. I'm going to say how to fund my trust, or how to fund a living revocable trust, how to get property into the trust. These are the questions that people ask, and this is the heart of your living revocable trust. The fact of the matter is, most people who get a living revocable trust, the family does not avoid probate like they think they're going to, because the trust doesn't own the assets. The trust has to own each asset that the dead person, you're not the dead person. The dead person has to own the assets that the dead person was supposed to be owning, because if the dead person's name is on the ownership, it has to go through probate. So the trick of the trust is we fund the trust, or we move the assets that you have to sign for. Now, you don't have to sign to sell a washer and dryer, but you have to sign to get into a bank account, or to sell a car, or to get into the brokerage account, or to get rid of the piece of real property. That's the big one. But those have to be transferred from ownership of individual to ownership of trust. And that's what we call funding the trust, is moving these assets over into the trust. Now, how do you do that? Well, it's totally dependent upon the asset. And the assets are things that you might not think about. For example, ownership of your LLC, or your S corporation, or your family limited partnership, or whatever it is. Those are assets that require your signature to transfer. If you're dead, we got to probate them. So the little business becomes a critical aspect of the probate issue. And yet, most, even estate planning attorneys, don't even bother with the little business. Let's look at the assets that we have to have funded into the living revocable trust. There's, of course, the bank accounts and the brokerage accounts and the safe deposit box, the cemetery lots, the timeshares, the oil and gas shares, the water shares, the little business, the LLC, the corporation, the limited partnership, whatever it is, those all have to be there. What else needs to be there? Well, what do you sign your name for in order to transfer? The car, the boat, the motor home. Now I'm going to tell you that we can usually cheat on, it's not cheating, but there's a way around the car and the boat and the motor home. The motor vehicle division in all states has a way of transferring those titles without actually having to go through probate. But when you buy your next car or your next motor home, you buy it in the name of the trust. So we fund the trust with the current assets that we own. And then the trick is, you've got to think for the rest of your life, I'm not me anymore. I am a trustee. I do not take title. The member of my LLC is not me, it's my living revocable trust. And I don't know how many times I've told you this, but there are three elements to the living revocable trust's name. The name of the trust, the date of the trust, and the trustee's name. All three of those elements have to be on the signature card down at the bank for the bank account, for the safe deposit box. They have to be on the brokerage account. They have to be on the deed that transfers the piece of real property from you to the trust. So the bank account, we go down to the bank, say, hi bank, made out trust, and the bank's going to want to see a copy of the trust, or what we call a certification of trust, or something, abbreviation of trust, whatever you want to call it. But it's a document which says, I made the trust, these are the powers of the trustee, this is the name of the trust. The bank doesn't need to know how it's going to be divided up after you die, but they do need to know that this trust exists. And by the way, you could have multiple trusts. When you open the bank account in the name of the trust, the bank is agreeing that they're going to govern that account by the terms of that trust. That's why the date has to be there. And whoever's named as the successor trustee, that's one of the elements that the bank has to know up front. That person then can claim that bank account when the first trustee, you, die. We avoid the probate process. But trust has to be funded. Each asset has a little different thing that you have to do in order to get that asset into the ownership of the trust. Now, you don't have to transfer your credit cards. They're not an asset, they're a liability, right? You don't have to, well, here's my rule of thumb. If a guy, my neighbor, can break into my house and steal it and sell it at a garage sale, then the trust doesn't have to own it. But the trust, the neighbor can't break into your house and sell your piece of property because that requires your signature on the deed. So when we're transferring real property, we have to have deeds. Deeds from you to the trust. The trustee, technically the trustee holds the title. But funding the trust is critical. And the fact of the matter is, most people don't fund their trust. I mean, it's huge. 2/3 of the trust, 3/4 of the trust, 9/10 of the people who get trusts, the family does not avoid probate because, one, the lawyer never told you to fund the trust, or he never did the trust, or he did two things, oh, that's another issue. The lawyer had a schedule. And on the schedule, he wrote down that the bank account and the piece of property and everything went into the trust. Is that a legal transfer? Yes. Does it work? No. And that's another YouTube that I have made. And that we have to go through schedules on a trust. They don't work. Forget them. You have to go to the bank. You have to change the title on the car. You have to change the deed to the house. You have to actually physically do these things. Just listing them on the schedule will not work. And I'll talk about schedules in another YouTube video. So funding the trust is critical. Each asset that you have to sign your name for has to be in the trust, and how you get it into the trust is a little different depending upon what the asset actually is. We have one, for example, on how to put, one YouTube on how to put a bank account into the trust. So this is Lee Phillips talking about the core principle of your living revocable trust. That is funding it or transferring ownership of your signature required assets into the trust's ownership.